Okay, so here's my lab. Right now it's not usable because the heat is not working. So this is the outside. It is directly across from my lecture room here. Um, let's see. We were going over, I just needed them to see maps. So this is the ending of our last lab for 8th grade, and it was the genetics lab. So here, I use one of my students. So here, we were finishing up Punnett squares. We used our family structure to help us. So traits that we have from dad, traits we have from mom, and how they're expressed in us. And then we did our Punnett squares because we had some donor DNA for an offspring. So let's see. Our green was to represent us. So these are kind of two separate things. So this was just one lab to come up with our cells. And this is us. So this would go into the category of me. And that's how your genes are expressed based on your traits, expressed based on, how your parents traits. I'm sorry. So that's with the green. The brown was the donor DNA that we used for the second portion. And it was just simply to give us an example, because our male to female ratio in our 8th grade is not even. So just to make it donor DNA. And then red is the offspring that was created as these Punnett squares were completed between our DNA and our donor DNA. So that's the donor, and this is how it should be expressed in the offspring. So this is just the cleanup from one lab, but it is freezing in here. So this is all it was. It was really, really simple. It was only supposed to be done within a day, and it did work. We had 2 different setups for our beads, and I did use beads because they're very inexpensive, easy. If they break or lose them, we're not freaking out. So we just went over some very general traits, hair length, and we gave how the alleles will be represented, shoe size, body build, so things like that. I gave them 3 options for each trait. I did not let them know what was the dominant trait, the recessive trait, or the mutation. Even though in the first portion between themselves, coming up with their replicated kind of DNA from mom and dad, or traits from mom and dad, they had 2. So they knew which was the dominant and which was the recessive, to kind of give them a representation of how it looks to a geneticist. For the second or the third portion of the assignment, in which they had their donor DNA and to create their offspring, they were able to put this together. And then for their very, very last portion, it came in a set of 3 or 4. I believe I skipped one. But this is where they were able to create their own offspring. And that one was placed up already. And that came on our white Chanel sticks. So they were able to create basically their own, they called them designer babies, in which they did not know which trait they were receiving, or which allele. Was it the dominant? Was it the recessive? Was it the mutation? And only once they were able to put everything together, they had their friends, classmates kind of laughing. We have this board. So what is the trait type? And then we have dominant. Is it recessive? And then, of course, with our examples, because we want to reinforce. And then a mutation. So it was really, really simple. The students just had to match up their beads and bead colors. We did go over the mutations. I left this blank because I intentionally use this every year. So we have different mutations every year. But students were able to tell, hey, just because I grabbed a clear bead, I thought that was the recessive like last time. Nope, this time it's a mutation. So that was just one of our small things that we did for 8th grade. 6th grade, of course, I wanted to start really, really simple. So we did the liquid rainbow, or the density. So the rainbow in a tube or rainbow in a jar, and it's just going over different densities. We also use different objects in there, so that we can tell, hey, how can this coin float in this layer, but it passed through the first 3 layers? So it was really good, really messy. We used rubbing alcohol, vegetable oil, maple syrup, detergent, corn syrup. That was just one. So we had 2 or 3 different test tubes with multiple materials, but this was the last one that kind of survived the board. So we had that information. Right now it's freezing. They were working on something in the back, so they removed my shelves. It's a little messy, but that's what we have here in the lab. The heat does not work, so we cannot use the room right now. Middle of restructuring. But this is a wrap up of my Ms. Cadwell science class, which you can look forward to in the upcoming school year or next school year, and some of the things that we do here just to reinforce learning and to establish, do you really like science? Do you like the weird gross facts? Do you like the tangible? Or is science just not your jail? Which is absolutely fine. I don't feel any way about it. Science wasn't my jail for a long time, not until high school. High school. I like science, but getting into it, it took a lot. I became a lot more confident when high school came around, because that was kind of the time that I was given a fly on my own. Elementary and middle school, it's always someone holding your hand. High school is when I realized, hey, I can do this by myself. I really am a lot better than I thought. So this is what we have here. My success tools from day one. We need to, my strongest, my biggest strong point is just really establishing that routine, breaking any of those bad study habits, and just creating study habits if you didn't have any before. So maybe they weren't bad, you just didn't have any, and that's absolutely fine. So 6th grade, we're just starting off rhythms, routines, planners, making sure we go back and check, use our resources appropriately. So if we have our bulletin board for our grade level, let's go ahead and check it when we're absent, or if we need additional assistance, let's go ahead and sign up for those things.